We're going to dig into an idea that every one of us has heard repeated multiple times, and it's one that I know from personal experience to be patently untrue. A few years ago, I was supposed to meet my wife for a pretty important doctor's appointment in her life, but I had a meeting that ran long, so I showed up a little bit late, and it was well underway. Things were going on, so I just kind of didn't pay any attention. I focused my energy on making sure that our two oldest kids, Jimmy and Emma, did not break any medical device that would cost me an obscene amount of money to replace. And about 15 minutes later, it was wrapping up, and the ultrasound tech said, "Okay, I think we got the measurements that we need." And I heard Jenny say, "Wait a minute, is that another one?" And my head snapped around real quick at that moment, just in time to see the nurse laugh and say, "Hey, yep." And Jenny started hyperventilating, just laying there on a table, hyperventilating, and I did what any good, loving husband would do. I pointed at her and laughed hysterically. And the tech said she'd never seen a reaction quite like ours before. But in my defense, before you judge me as just some sort of jerk, if you've ever seen Jenny hyperventilate, it's very funny. But it was in that exact moment that I knew beyond a shadow of a doubt, anybody who ever tells you God will never give you more than you can handle is full of garbage. And I want to lean into that idea this morning, that God will never give you more than you can handle, because it's something we've all heard a whole bunch of times, and I think it's a particularly dangerous belief. It's dangerous because this world is broken and life is hard, and all of us have situations where we feel like we're in over our heads pretty frequently. It's just like an uncomfortable reality of living in a shattered world. There's a good chance that you are either in the middle of a difficult season, about to be in the middle of a difficult season, or just coming out of the middle of a difficult season. Sometimes it feels like every time we turn around, life gets complicated. And most of the time, it's way heavier and more difficult than being told that you're having twins. I was mostly kidding about that. There are times when having twins feels like you're drowning and someone hands you a baby for both arms. But it's mostly awesome, and I would do it all over again. But I got a whole long list of stuff in my life that I would not go back and do over again, and I bet you do too. Maybe for some of you it's in the past. Maybe for some of you it's right now. Some of you are sitting in here this morning dealing with some difficult stuff. Maybe you have financial burdens and you're just not sure how you're going to make the numbers work when you got too much month left at the end of the money. Maybe you're thinking about some rough news you got from a doctor about you or about somebody that you love. Maybe you got a relationship that's blowing up. Maybe you got a relationship that blew up a long time ago and you're just not sure how in the world you're going to move forward from this space. Maybe it's your job. Maybe some disaster struck that you had no control over. It could be that you're battling depression, addiction, or something else. I don't know about you guys, but when that kind of stuff happens in my life, it just feels like I spiral quick. Like, it's incredible how fast we move from being okay to feeling like we're in over our heads and it's too heavy for us to carry and we just don't know what to do next. And without fail, when we find ourselves occupying those spaces, some kind, well-meaning Christian comes along and says, "I know it's tough, but don't worry, God will never give you more than you can handle." Are you sure about that? Or like they say, whenever God closes the door, he opens a window. Whenever people say that to me, I want to ask them, how often do you go through windows? Like door, window, same thing. Now if you're on the 10th floor, there's not. Like, this is the stuff that I think about. It's baloney. Or there's this one. This is the same big idea that God will never give you more than you can handle. I found out this week there are whole Pinterest pages dedicated to artwork you can put up in your homes or tattoos that you can get that say, God gives his toughest battles to his strongest soldiers. Except in the Bible, when he picked a meek, timid stutterer named Moses to lead a whole nation out of slavery to the most powerful empire in the world. Or he picked this weak, little, nothing, nobody guy named Gideon who'd never fought anything in his life to lead an army against 30,000 invaders. Or this one time when this big old army tried to take over Israel, and they sent out this mighty, legendary warrior giant named Goliath. And all of God's soldiers, including the king who was supposed to fight that battle, were too scared. So he gave his toughest battle to a little shepherd kid who was like, bigger they are, the harder they fall. Like, I probably can't beat this guy, but if God just aims the rock right, maybe I'll live. We'll give it a shot. But despite all that history, despite all the evidence in our world and in our lives to the contrary, we keep on saying this stuff, and we keep on believing this stuff, and we keep on trying to convince ourselves that it's true, and then life punches us square in the throat, and it doesn't feel true anymore. Feels like God gave us way more than we can handle. And the thing is, in those moments, there's a reason that people tell us that stuff. There's a reason that we're desperate to believe that God will never give us more than we can handle. And it's this, we're dying to know that we're going to make it through. We're just yearning to believe that we have enough strength and we have enough willpower and we have enough ability that we can just reach deep and work our way out and fight our way through it and make a way from where we are through the pain out the other side. And hearing that tough battles are given to strong soldiers, hearing that God's never going to put anything on our plate that's beyond us, boosts our self-confidence. And that is exactly why I think this is one of the most dangerous and poisonous lies floating around out there. Because when our world is caving in, self-confidence is misplaced confidence. Self-confidence is a confidence in the wrong thing and the wrong place. It's confidence in something we ought not to have confidence in. But we have this tendency. We live in this radically individualistic culture. Self-sufficiency and self-reliance are such gods in our culture that continually, repeatedly, over and over and over again, we try to boost our self-confidence in the moments where we most desperately need God confidence. In the spaces where self-confidence is the worst thing that we can have because we're weak and we're unable, but He is strong and He's capable. There's a catch, though, in getting rid of self-confidence and relying on God confidence. It means admitting that you're not in control, which is actually not a problem in my life. As long as I get to drive, hold the remote, everyone does what I say, and nothing ever goes wrong, I'm not a control freak at all. Not even a little bit. I don't know about the rest of you jerks, but seriously, it's terrifying. It's terrifying for us to admit that we're not in control. But you know what's even scarier? Believing that you are in control while knowing deep down that you are incapable. But welcome to life in a broken world where God not only allows you to experience situations that are beyond what you can handle, but He does it all the time, repeatedly, far too often if He's asking for my opinion. So the question for us isn't whether we're going to encounter situations that are too heavy, too difficult, too much, too far beyond us to carry them on our own. The question is, what do we do when they come? How do we respond? Because every one of us has felt before like we might not survive it. So when the storm is raging, what is God doing in our lives and how do we navigate that? And we're going to answer that question this morning by looking at a really cool story from the Old Testament. If you have a Bible with you this morning, you can open it up to the book of 2 Chronicles. If you find 1 and 2 Kings, keep going. If you find Ezra and Nehemiah, you went too far, go back. If you don't have a Bible, don't worry, we'll put the words on the screen for you. And if you don't own one or your kids don't, we got a bunch at the Next Steps table. We'd love for you to take one on your way out. But 2 Chronicles, chapter 20, it tells us a story that you may be unfamiliar with, but you might actually know the name of the guy the story's about. How many of you have ever heard the phrase, jumpin' Jehoshaphat? Yeah. All the young people in here are like, what? And all the people of a certain vintage are like, I've heard that all the time. But jumpin' Jehoshaphat, right? This phrase we've heard, and this is the story of Jehoshaphat. And he actually got his nickname from a couple chapters earlier in the Bible. We read that some of his men were stranded on the other side of a 10-foot wall, but he refused to leave them there. So he picked up his sword and he jumped on the wall and he jumped over to rescue them. So he got named Jumpin' Jehoshaphat. Pretty cool, huh? If it was true. It's not. I made that up. That's a complete fabrication. The Bible never talks about him jumping, which really is confusing to me. So I looked it up and I found out that this phrase actually originated a few hundred years ago in Puritan New England. Because apparently back in those days, if you said a real curse word, or you took the Lord's name in vain, you got tarred and feathered or put in stocks, because Puritans were just a barrel of fun. And so they made up some fake cuss words. If you hit your hammer with a thumb, you said, Jumpin' Jehoshaphat, which is lame. So just to be clear, number one, this guy did nothing to deserve his cool nickname. He never even jumped. And number two, it's not even his name. Puritan cussers mispronounced it. His name is Jehoshaphat. But it is his story, okay? And he was the king of Judah, and he was a good king. He loved God, and he got rid of all the idols in the land, and he was leading his people toward the Lord. But even though he was a good dude, even though he was chasing after God with his whole heart, even though he was leading really well, his life wasn't always perfect. Sound familiar to anybody else? And what we're going to do today is drop in on him and maybe his worst moment. Like the scariest day of his entire life is this space where he's in way over his head. And we're going to do that because we can learn from the way he responded to that, how we ought to respond when we find ourselves in similar situations. So 2 Chronicles chapter 20, verse 1. It says this, after this, the Moabites, the Ammonites, and some of the Maonites came to wage war against Jehoshaphat. Some people came and told Jehoshaphat, a vast army is coming against you from Edom, from the other side of the Dead Sea. It's already at Hazazon Tamar. That is En Gedi. Alarmed, Jehoshaphat resolved to inquire of the Lord, and he proclaimed a fast for all Judah. The people of Judah came together to seek help from the Lord. Indeed, they came from every town in Judah to seek him. So real quick, he's just having like a normal day. Here's the king. He's sitting on like his king chair in Jerusalem, and some people show up, and they're like, oh yeah, by the way, sneak attack, giant armies coming against you. They're 30 miles away. You can see it on the map here. Okay, they're at En Gedi. He's in Jerusalem. That's 30 miles. Even if the army's like, oh, we don't feel like killing everyone today, we're going to take the scenic route up the Dead Sea. They're like a couple days away. And the thing is, Judah has no chance against these guys. So you can imagine that this is a bit of a panicked moment for Jehoshaphat. Like he's looking ahead at reality like, we're all going to die. Pretty soon, we're all going to die. And so he stands up in front of the entire nation and he prays. And this is what he prays. Lord, the God of our ancestors, are you not the God who is in heaven? You rule over all the kingdoms of the nations. Power and might are in your hand, and no one can withstand you. Our God, did you not drive out the inhabitants of this land before your people Israel and give it forever to the descendants of Abraham your friend? They have lived in it and have built in it a sanctuary for your name, saying, if calamity comes upon us, whether the sword of judgment or plague or famine, we will stand in your presence before this temple that bears your name, and we will cry out to you in our distress, and you will hear us and save us. Here's what I want us to see from this response. When life is more than you can handle, step one is to look back. I know that seems incredibly counterintuitive. When crises hit, we want to look forward. We want to figure out how to navigate a path out of where we are to where we want to be. But check it out. The first thing Jehoshaphat did was prayed a prayer of remembrance. He looked back on who God was and what God had done for his people over the years. He stood up in front of his nation. He said, hey, before we move forward, before we even think about what comes next, we need to remember not just what God's done, but who he's been to us and to our nation for thousands and thousands of years, from generation to generation to generation. And he does that to instill God confidence in his people. Because they got no time for self-confidence. Too late, not going to work. No time for self-confidence. It's time for God confidence. They're in this moment and their hearts are melting with fear, so they need to look back and remember who God is. So their king stands up and he reminds them, you guys, God is faithful to meet us in the mess. He's faithful to meet us in the mess. He always has been. In our lives, looking back is powerful. Looking back at who God's been and what God's done, because past behavior predicts future behavior. In the last 17 years, I've been on countless road trips with my wife. And every time she promises me that it'll be fun and we can talk and we can hang out and she'll stay awake to help me stay awake so I don't fall asleep while I'm driving. And there were a couple years where I believed that load of baloney. But for the last 15 of them, I know what's going to happen. Before we even get out of whatever town we're in, her feet are going to go up on the dashboard. And after the feet hit the dashboard, the next step is the eyes close. And then within 10 minutes of being on the interstate, she's gone. And I got nothing to keep me awake other than my thoughts and the rumble strips. Okay? But I know that's going to happen. I know it's going to happen every time because it's what happens every time. Listen, in your life, in my life, when things get rough, when things get difficult, we got to look back and remember God has not forgotten us yet. We can't look back on a time when he abandoned us because he has not done it yet. So when you feel afraid about what might lie ahead, look back. Look back and remember who he's been to you and to his people for thousands of years, because that's who he still is, and that's how he still moves in our lives. Sometimes there's a clarity we can find looking back at the past that we can't find if we're looking ahead to the future. So step one is to look back. And then Jehoshaphat continues his prayer. He says, but now here are men from Ammon, Moab, and Mount Seir, whose territory you would not allow Israel to invade when they came from Egypt. So they turned away from them and did not destroy them. See how they are repaying us by coming to drive us out of the possession you gave us as an inheritance? Our God, will you not judge them? For we have no power to face this vast army that is attacking us. When life is overwhelming, step 2 is to look in. When it feels like the waves are crashing over you, take a moment to look inside you and be honest with God about how much you have left in the tank. And for what it's worth, take a long enough moment to realize that you got not enough left in the tank, that there's nothing that you're bringing to the table, that you're powerless to face the situation that lies in front of you. It's weird and uncomfortable, but it is profoundly liberating to realize that you're in a situation that is beyond your control. Corrie ten Boom was a Dutch Christian who helped a whole bunch of Jews escape the Nazis during World War II, and eventually she was caught and captured and imprisoned. She got sent to the Ravensbrück concentration camp where she witnessed unspeakable horrors, including the death of her sister. She later wrote that an interaction with her father that she'd never forgotten had framed her prayers and helped her hold on to hope in the darkest of days. When she was a young girl, her dad took her on a trip on a train, and at some point during the train ride, she looked up and asked him what sex was. And he didn't say anything. And she wrote that after a while, she got weirded out. Like, I don't know if I asked it wrong. I shouldn't have asked that, or is he going to answer? Is he just going to pretend that I never said that at all? And then the train stopped, and he looked down at her, and he said, "Hey, Corrie, could you grab my bag for me?" And she tried to pick it up, but she couldn't. She said, "Dad, it's too heavy." And he smiled and nodded, and he picked up the bag. He said, "There are things in life which are too heavy for us, that we're not able to carry. There are things in life that we're not yet ready to carry, so we have to let our Father carry them for us." She said in the moments of panic, in the moments of despair inside that concentration camp, she regularly came before God and prayed, "Father, this is too heavy. I cannot carry it. I cannot carry it." When life gets too heavy, and it will, look inside, come before God and say, "God, I cannot carry this." And then do what Jehoshaphat did. Okay, he closes his prayer with one of my favorite lines in the entire Bible. You guys, I've prayed this so many times. It's verse 12. We do not know what to do, but our eyes are on you. We do not know what to do, but our eyes are on you. I don't know what to do, but I know where to look. This is all the men of Judah with their wives and children and little ones stood there before the Lord. Step 3, when the weight of the world feels like it's crushing you, is look up. Look back, look in, and look up. Point your eyes in the right direction. The psalmist says, "I cast my eyes unto the hills, from whence cometh my help." I feel like this morning, man, if we walk out of here and no one remembers anything else that I said, if you don't remember one thing other than this simple sentence, we will all be better prepared for what life throws at us. I just want to read it together. Would you guys read this with me? You ready? We do not know what to do, but our eyes are on you. As I look back at my own life, I can't help but think of all the times I just kept fighting and struggling and trying to figure it out and do it all on my own. And then finally, like when all else failed, when I came to the end of myself, when I looked inside and thought, God will never give me more than I can handle, I'm a strong enough warrior for this, and realized that I wasn't, finally I prayed. I got a buddy who's a church planter in Minnesota, and a couple weeks ago his son broke his arm, like just gruesomely. And he was telling me that he freaked out. He's like, I was more scared than my kid. I called the doctor, I called the ER, I called my insurance company, I called my wife. I'm like talking to nurses. I'm catching up on emails. I'm thinking about all the implications because this is grotesque. He's going to have surgery, and I was freaking out. And then finally, after a really long time, we're sitting there waiting for a doctor. And I looked at my kid and I was like, hey, buddy, you know what we can do now? We can pray. We'll just ask that God will be with you and that he'll heal you. And his kid looked back at him and said, yeah, duh. I prayed when I broke it. I've been praying this whole time. You can pray whenever you want, Dad. Kids are so humbling sometimes, especially when you're a pastor. But we wait until the very last minute sometimes to look up. And that's where our eyes need to be fixed. C.S. Lewis, the great writer and thinker, once wrote this. He said, I call God's willingness to even still answer us divine humility. Because it is a poor thing for us to strike our colors to God when the ship is going down under us. a poor thing to come to him as a last resort, to offer up our own when it is no longer worth keeping. If God were proud, he would hardly have us on such terms. But he is not proud. He stoops to conquer. He will have us even though we've shown that we prefer everything else to him and come to him because there's nothing better now to be had. I love how Jehoshaphat looks up. He just takes this massive problem and he gives it away. He's like, all right, we're going to get slaughtered here in a day or two. That's yours now. And he does that because he believes God is still there. Like the presence of the enemy doesn't negate the presence of God. And we got to get that one. Like for us, storms are coming. Life's going to be tough. We don't know exactly what's coming down the pipe, but we know something is going to happen that's more than we can bear, and we must understand. Never let the presence of a storm cause you to doubt the presence of God. He's there. Jehoshaphat doesn't doubt it. He takes his storm and he hands it off to God like he's handing off a football. I played on maybe the worst high school football team ever assembled, ever. We won like 4 games in 4 years. We were so bad at everything. In almost every position. Our offensive line was like a sieve. I remember one time as a senior, I was supposed to run a slant route. It's the fastest play you can run in football. It takes like a half second. You take 3 steps and turn, and the ball's supposed to be there. Well, I took 3 steps and turned, and a giant lineman was already jumping on our quarterback, which should not be physically possible if anyone even thought about standing in his way. We were so bad. But we had one guy. He was a running back. He was strong, and he was big, and he was a state champion in the 100 meters. 11 players on the field. 10 of us couldn't. Lucas could. If we were going to do anything other than 3 plays and punt, we just had to give it to Lucas. Like, every time. This is what Jehoshaphat does. He's like, whew, I'm going to die. There you go. There you go. I don't know what to do, but my eyes are on you. I can't do anything. Frankly, I wouldn't even know where to start, God, but here you go. Look up. And then God responds, and his response is so cool, and it's so powerful. And it's the same way he wants to respond to you and me right in the middle of our pain and right in the middle of our difficulty. He speaks through a prophet, says the Spirit of the Lord came on Jahaziel, son of Zechariah, son of a whole lot of other names I'm not going to try and pronounce. And he stood in the assembly. He said, listen, King Jehoshaphat, and all who live in Judah and Jerusalem. This is what the Lord says to you. Do not be afraid or discouraged because of this vast army, for the battle is not yours, but God's. The battle is not yours, but God's. And forget the Pinterest page about like tattooing, God gives tough battles to strong soldiers. Tattoo that one. The battle is not yours, but God's. We don't know what the future holds, but we know who holds the future. It may be murky as we look ahead, but hope exists out there somewhere. It does. And somewhere, maybe further, and it may take longer than we wanted. And that's scary. It's scary. It's difficult to look out ahead and trust God in a world that's just chock full of reasons to be afraid. I've told you guys this before. I'll tell you it again. I have known fear all my life. I sometimes feel like fear is just a constant companion for me, but I have this conviction. Like when the inevitable moments of crisis come, when we're keeled over from the pain and the impact, if we are trusting our own power, if we're operating under the idea that God's not going to give me more than I can handle, that this battle must be because I'm such a strong soldier, fear will win. Eventually, if we walk through life believing that, fear will cripple us. We'll shut ourselves off from love because we're afraid of getting hurt. We'll let the dreams that God placed inside our souls shrivel up and die inside of us because we're afraid of failing. We'll settle because we're afraid of being vulnerable. Fear will cause us to resist pain and avoid it at all costs, and we will never live into the future God promises us he created us for because fear wins. Let's be real, the world is full of things to be afraid of. It is. There are only 2 categories for fear in the Bible. Only 2. Only 2 ways that God ever tells us we're allowed to think about fear in the Bible. Fear God and fear not. There are 2 categories for fear in the Bible. Fear God and fear not. And there's a reason we are taught in the Bible to fear only God. Because our fears become our masters. What we fear is what we're subject to. And where there is no fear, there is no control. If we look back, look in, look up, and look ahead. Look ahead. then we get set free from being enslaved to the fears that dominate our lives about what the future might hold, especially when we're in difficult times. We've got to look ahead. Because we know who God is, and that changes the game right in the middle of our struggles. Even if deliverance doesn't happen on our timeline, we know that it's going to happen. And it's hard to wait. It's easy just to look at the broken pieces of our lives and ask God, couldn't you answer just this one? Couldn't you just set me free from this? Couldn't you just liberate me from this addiction right now? Couldn't you just heal my kid? Couldn't you just reconcile this broken relationship? Couldn't you just make my depression go away? Couldn't you just? And we know that he could, and we know that he isn't. And what do we do with that? Well, I think we can do the same thing again that Jehoshaphat did. He praised God before the deliverance came. Okay, he took his whole nation and they went out to meet this vast army. And they're looking out. Here's 3 nations gathered against them, but they didn't go out there with swords because what's the point? They went out there and they sang worship songs. This is what happened in 2 Chronicles 20. They're like, all right, well, we're not going to fight these guys. That'd be a bad deal. So we're going to just worship. And they stood on the field, and Jehoshaphat instructed his nation in verse 21 to sing this song. Give thanks to the Lord, for his love endures forever. This is before deliverance came. Give thanks to the Lord, for his love endures forever. And this word that he uses for love is this Hebrew word called hesed, that we translate all kinds of different ways all throughout the Bible. Love, loving kindness, enduring faithfulness. It's this word, this concept of this unbreakable, never-ending covenant, passionate love that God decided he has for us, and nothing can take it away. His hesed will not be broken. You know what that means for us? It means that our hurt, that our shattered lives, that our worst moments, that the times when we feel like it's too heavy and we can't carry it anymore, like the waves are crashing over us and we're going to drown, those moments never get to write the final chapter of our story, ever. The final chapter is all things made new and all things set right. And we don't always know what the path is going to look like from right where we are to there. We don't know how we're going to get from this space that we don't want to be in to the space that we desperately want to be in, but we know the end of the story, which means unequivocally, if it's not good, it's not done. In your life, when you feel crushed by the weight of it and the pain of it, if it's not good, God is not finished yet. He's the God who sets all things right and makes all things new. It's what he does. It's what he's always done. It's what he's at work doing right now, and we believe that. We can praise him in the middle of the storm. We can be set free right smack dab in the middle of the place we don't want to be, to stop asking, how can I get out of this, and start asking, what can I get out of this? So look, I don't know when it's going to end. I don't know exactly how it's going to end. I don't know when I'm going to come out the other side. But I know that God is present. I know that God is real. And I know that God is at work. So what is it that I can learn about who he is and how passionately he loves me and how desperately I need him right here, right now, in the pain? We can do that all while God is working to set things right and make things new, because that's what he does. He delivered Judah and Jehoshaphat. He will deliver you. This side or the other, your brokenness is not the final chapter of your story. God is making things new. It's who he is. It's what he does. What if you really believe that? Like deep down in the core of your soul, believed it. What if in difficult times and shattered spaces, instead of striving and struggling and fighting and believing that you can handle it on your own, you came to God with empty hands? What if you really dared to let God be to you all that he says he will be? It's my challenge to you this week. My challenge to you the next time you feel like life is tough and it's overwhelming and you don't know what you're going to do. Look back, look in, look up, look ahead, and dare to let God be to you all that he says he will be. I think if we do that, what you'll find is that even though God won't always keep you from things that are beyond your capabilities, God will never give you more than he can handle. God will never give you more than he can handle, and that's a beautiful truth to live by, because it means that hope is real even when things seem hopeless. And it means that we are no longer slaves to fear, because we know that the end of the story is love, deliverance, and all things made new. Will you guys pray with me? God, life is hard sometimes. just come before you empty and broken, full of fear, sometimes frustrated. But we come before you humbly with open hands. We do not know what to do. So our eyes are on you, and we trust that the battle is not ours, but yours. God, would you just inspire all of us this week to stop striving and stop fighting and stop trying to muster up or pretend that we have a strength that simply doesn't exist inside of us. Would you set us free from this slavery to fear in the middle of life's broken moments, and liberate us to trust that you're present, that you're real, and that you're at work even now, making all things new. Thank you for that. Thank you for your love. Praise in Jesus' name. Amen.